Okay, today we're going to talk about HP tuners. I've already read the file out of the vehicle. This is a 6-liter. It really doesn't matter if it's a 4.8, 5.3, 5.7, 6.0, 6.2. They're all going to be about the same. Same concept anyways. So if you read the file out of the vehicle, the first thing you'll want to do is look at the operating system. So I want to go over this. So we're going to be talking about turbo tuning today. So this is the custom operating systems offered by HP tuners. You have a speed density real-time tuning, which doesn't really work. So I don't advise using this. And then you have a 1-bar enhanced real-time MAF. This is using the MAF sensor. This is speed density using the MAP sensor. So this is only good for 105 kPa. So this does work okay for a car with a really big cam in it. You can use this. But if you're wanting to run boost, you want to run a 2-bar or a 3-bar. The reason is this VE map is only scaled for 105 kPa. This one is scaled to 210, and this one's 300 and something. So 2-bar is good for about 15 pounds, and 3-bar is good for about 30 pounds. So if you're going to stay just low boost on 15 pounds or less, this is the one you want to run. And if you want to run 30 pounds, this is the one to run. For today, we're just going to go over the 2-bar. So you would click this. It would ask you to hit OK, and then you would file, and you would save the file as something or other. But I already made the file, so all I have to do is open it. But you have to save the file and close it, because if you, sorry, it already closed. Anyways, if you don't close it out and reopen it, it won't apply the change. So what I mean is it won't apply the change in the VE. So if you come over here to airflow and come in now, since I opened it and closed it, it'll be to 210. But if I were to just save that here, see, there's nothing in here now, but before all this stuff was in there, and it was saved. But anyways, it would have only been scaled to 105, which isn't even here anymore, but now it's scaled to 210. Anyways, it kind of scales everything like the factory map, but it brings it all the way down to 200. Usually what I do when I build a turbo tune is you can just run this 120 or so, just to make sure you got enough fuel, and then come up to 110, and then just interpolate the whole thing. And that'd be a nice base point, something to start with. And this isn't going to be perfect. This table has to be, your injector characteristics have to be perfect, and everything else has to match for this table to be right. If your injector characteristics and everything's all screwed up, and it depends on what fuel you're running, I mean, there's a lot of variables. Anyways, we'll get into that more later on. So you're going to have a 2 or 3-bar map sensor, obviously, for this to work right. So we're just going to go right back to the beginning here and go through the whole thing. So right here, this is a 6.0. Obviously, if it was something else, it would be different. And it tells you the cylinder volume here. The shift light stuff, you don't have to touch any of this stuff at all if you don't want to. Real-time tuning, like I said, this doesn't really work. I've tried it multiple times, and I never had good luck with it. So moving on, you have your idle base. If you have a camshaft, you're going to want to raise these numbers. Usually, I go like 850 or something if you don't, know where you're going to be at. And then down here, you could do like 1,000 or 1,100 even. Something like that would be fine just to start with. You can also bring these in here and interpolate a little, get a little bit smoother. But yeah, just moving on, rolling. This is set to 0 in a lot of vehicles. Sometimes it has values in it. Then you have a stall saver RPM. I usually just leave these alone. I just don't ever touch them. Moving on, go to airflow. Now this can definitely get confusing in here. If you have a really big cam in a car, you're probably going to have to mess with the throttle follower, throttle cracker, and this area here as well. But that's if it's a really big cam. I don't even touch these, even if it's a really big cam. I don't touch these unless I absolutely have to. But anyways, we'll talk about that later in a different video. We're just kind of running through the tables and what you should touch right away and what you shouldn't touch right away. But right away, this has a base idle airflow. Now, some people like to just come in here and add a bunch. Like, I think some people just put 127, and then you can interpolate through there. You can look at it here if you'd like. Just as there's something in here, what that pretty much does is it allows more airflow to the engine. To keep the thing idling when you have a big camshaft. You don't even have to do this, really. I mean, if you didn't want to do this, you could just usually undo that. I don't know why that was like that. It must have, when I went out, it must have not let me. Okay, whatever, not a big deal. You could just leave it stock for now. You don't have to put any of the values in it. And I'm just telling you, kind of what people do to get these things to idle with a huge cam in them. Moving on, we already did that. So we won't be using the MAF calibration anymore. So we'll be turning off the MAF cal completely because this is speed density only. It doesn't use the mass airflow sensor. And most of the reason for that is just because that's the way the HV tuners has it. You can run this and run it with boost. Sorry, this table. But I don't know how many pounds you can really run on the stock MAF. Maybe like 15, maybe less. But to scale all of that, and usually people are running blow-off valves, and when you run a blow-off valve, it sucks air in and out, and then it gives you a lean and a rich mixture in your engine, and there's no way to get that perfect. So that's why a lot of people just go straight to speed density when they're running a turbocharger. Moving on, these here you want to just set to, I usually just set them to 8,000, and this one here too if you're running speed density. Electronic throttle. You can go in here and mess with this a little bit. I usually don't. I just leave them stock. Sometimes people play with this if they have a big cam again. They come in here and raise these values a little bit, but I don't. I just leave it alone. Now we're going to fuel, and this is your stowage. This is your air-fuel ratio, and it's scaled from 0 to 100%. This is based on alcohol, so E85 or E100. If you have 100% ethanol, obviously be down in the 9s, and then 0 ethanol is 14.6. This is just scaled 14.6 or 14.7, whatever, all the way across, because there's no reason this isn't running on alcohol. A lot of guys that run E85, they scale these things out for ethanol, which, all you need to do to figure this out is find an ethanol file and go in and copy that one and paste it into here. Not a big deal. But most of the fuel today anyways, if you're running on gasoline, has like 10 to 15% in it. So that would equal around 14. And this, I don't know why it does 13, 9, 7, whatever, but I just hit 14 in it. And that's what it went to. So that's not a big deal. But if you were going to run on gasoline, you should, probably just put 14 in it. Doesn't really matter. You can run 14.7 too. Everybody's got their own way of doing things. Okay, injector control. Usually don't touch any of this until down here, obviously. All of this stuff, but the injector bank selection, yeah, I just leave that alone. So right away, this is your flow. This is a 25-pound injector. Obviously, you can change it up here to if you need to, but I think the poundage makes the most sense. So this is a line straight across. So this is a return style fuel system. So whenever you have a return style fuel system, they all should always be the same. When you have a non-returnless, you'll actually see these numbers grow. When the more kPa you run, the number will grow. Obviously, if you're putting injectors in a turbo car, which you need to, I wouldn't, if you're going to spend the money, I wouldn't put less than an 80-pound injector, in one of these things. If you're going to, obviously, people are using the stock injectors and decapping them, and that works okay as long as you send them in and have them flowed, and if the injector's in really good shape, I think they flow almost like 75 or 80 decapped. So some people are getting away with those, and that's just the 25 pounders. And then you have the 33 pounder, which are the flex fuel injectors. And I think those are close to 90 pounders decapped. But some people like to go super cheap on injectors and stuff. It's all about, your budget and what you want to do. So, but anyways, moving on. So when you buy injectors, you need to know the flow rate. You need to know this number here. This changes. The pulse changes here. Default injector changes. The offset table needs to change. The short pulse limit needs to change. Short pulse adder needs to change. And the boundaries sometimes. And sometimes these numbers, but I usually don't go down into these. And then this is your cranking fuel. Really, I've never really messed with any of this. Usually, with a cam, I can usually get the stuff set up pretty well. I don't have to go into the cranking fuel and touch much of this. Moving on, this is all your injector stuff. When you need to put bigger injectors in, you have to change all these values. Otherwise, the table that I was talking about earlier is not going to work right. You're going to be chasing your tail like crazy. If you just put, say, 80 pounds in right here where the 25 was at and, didn't change any of the stuff, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't run worth a crap anyways. But this is super important to have all this in data. And when you buy injectors off the internet or whatever, sometimes they don't come with this kind of stuff. So I recommend if you buy a set of injectors, get the injector data. Okay, moving on. This is your oxygen sensor stuff. Long-term fuel trim. If you were wanting to disable these, you would put this something to high, like 270, 280, just anything higher than what it was. Same thing in here. You'd set this at 230 or something, just something higher. That I don't think your coolant temp should ever get up that high. And then what you'd also want to do, this is your voltage for your oxygen sensors. I usually leave these alone. And then you have your short term as well. If you want to disable it, you just hit disabled. Usually this is how I start with a tune that I don't know if it's got a cam in it, then most likely you're going to have to turn the long term and the short term off right away, and just work on the table. EQ ratio 1 is lambda, so anything more than 1, it's adding fuel. So it looks like anything above 190 degrees, it's not adding fuel anymore. Sometimes I go in here and I just go to like 150, and I just set these all to 1, just so they're not adding fuel. And I don't know, why it's adding fuel in that little area. Just get rid of it. I mean, you can even get rid of this table, this one too, if you'd like. That way you're at lambda all the time and there's not, being fuel added just here and there. Anything below 1 is richer. So this is richer than 14.7, which means when you go richer, the number goes lower. So 14 is lean, 12 is rich, 10 is even richer. 99 would be like 14.5 or whatever. 98 would be like 14.4, something like that, but you get the point. Anyways, we don't have to mess with this at all much. That's all I do with that table. And then we have power and rich. You can set this higher. Some people like to put this at like 80, 85. This just means when it's going to turn on. So what the power and rich table does is it adds fuel to the engine when you're to the regular map. So back to the same map again here, this is adding fuel, but the power and rich will actually add fuel on top of that. And from the factory, it's set up 90 here. When you're running a turbo engine, you don't want these really high. That's 90% throttle for it to activate. Through here, you'd probably want it at 20% or 15 even. And then through here, you'd want it at like 50 or 40. And then through here, you'd want it at like maybe 60% or something. Something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can come up with your own numbers. Obviously in the higher RPMs, I like to keep them low. So if you just barely touch it, it's coming on, when the turbos, because if you got a turbo that'll spool it, really small turbos will spool really quick. Down here, you might have to run these at 40 or 30 even, just depending where your turbo spools, Some people just disable this too, so it will not work. You can do it either way, but I like to use it. Now from the factory, it's set to 5,500 RPMs for 60 seconds before this even turns on. That's outrageous. It's not even working pretty much from the factory. So I want to set the delay at 0. You don't want to be delaying the fuel in your engine, obviously. And then I usually set this at 2,000. And some people put them at 200 or whatever, but I go for 2,000. And then now you want to set this up. So this is already like 1.25 is pretty rich already. 1.2 is pretty good. But usually what I do is I put these at 1.2, and then anything higher than that, I'd add more fuel to it. Probably go through here and interpolate a little bit. So how this works is let's go to the calculator. 14.7 is Stoich divided by 1.2 equals 12.25 air fuel. So if everything's set up right everywhere else, when you have this thing floored, it should be commanding a 12.25. And then in the other one, the bigger number up top, it will command 14.7 divided by 1.25 equals 11.7 at wide open throttle. Now, This is going to change, obviously, if you're on gasoline or E85. But realistically, a 12-0 air fuel is good for about 12 pounds safe. Anything below that, there's so many different ways to tune and so many different, air fuel ratios to go by, but that's usually what I go by. 12-0 on gasoline, I usually go for 10 to 12 pounds. I usually just try to stay at 10 pounds with a, 12-0, 12-2. Some people run it way richer than that or leaner. It's all, like I said, it's depending on how you want to tune your vehicle, and you need to look at your spark plugs. And once the tune is really getting up there where it's spot on, then you also have a boost enrichment table here. This is set for 1. Usually you can just leave this alone, but if you are wanting to run more, obviously you can put this at 1.2 or 1.3 when it's really up at the 15 pounds range. You could put it at like 1.3, and then you could put this down to like 1.2, and then you could leave the rest of this 1 or whatever you want to do. I think that this here is pretty sufficient. Now you have a cat protection. You want to turn that off. Obviously, you're probably not going to be running a catalytic converter, and then you have your rev limit. A lot of people rev these engines, depending on your turbo, is going to be what you can rev this engine. So I say like a T4 turbo, like a S475 with a 7583 turbine wheel, T4 110. They're pretty much 6200. I would say they're pretty much capped out. So you could shift it exactly at 6200, and then you would put this down at like 6199, and you could do the same with this. But if you have a T6 turbo, obviously you can rev it way higher. People rev these to 6800 all the time. And you could probably do that with this, but just for a street tune or whatever, I think this should be sufficient. You don't want to leave big gaps in the RPM because it'll balance back and forth, and you don't want that in your rev limit, especially on a turbo engine. You really don't even want to hit your rev limiter. So you might even want to raise these to 73 or so, depending on when you want to shift. You might want to shift the truck at 6,000 or whatever. I think I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'm just trying to get through this as fast as possible. The fuel milligrams, you want to change these if you have really big injectors. Sometimes you might put this down to like 8 or 5 or 3 even. Like say like a Bosch 210. You have to change this to get the thing to idle right. Flex fuel, this is how you enable it. You would just enable that, and then these values should be fine. And then when you enable that, you'd want to go back to your fuel and set this table up like it should be. You're going to want to run that. Obviously, you're going to have a content sensor and stuff like that. Moving on, the spark table. So this is your main spark tables. This is a low and high octane. Through here, usually I start out at like 13 degrees. Down here, your air mass, you have to log your air mass in your scanner. Here, I don't know if this is just a base scanner. I never built, I never scanned this vehicle. This just comes with HP tuners. But anyways, I don't think we're scanning that one right now, but you want to have equivalence ratio. 1 is lambda, which is equal to 14.7, 14.6.8, whatever. You definitely want to have these two all the time when you're logging. Your cylinder air mass, your injector pulse width, and then your injector duty cycle obviously should be in here too. Your short-term fuel trims are automatically probably going to be in all of these, and they're right here and they're right here. Obviously, if they're not down here, that sometimes they're just up here. But this scanner always has your fuel trims in here. But right away, since I turned them off, you're not going to be using them anyways. So we'll go back real quick. Anyways, 13 starting point down here for a turbo engine, and you interpolate, and then come through here again and just interpolate this way. And that's pretty sufficient for a turbo tune. Obviously, most of the time your cylinder grams, you're probably going to max them out. Like if you're running a 3-bar and 30 pounds, you're going to get pretty close to the cylinder air mass. But when you're in boost, usually you're going to be in the 80s to 90s. But 13 degrees, I think, is pretty sufficient. You can lower these numbers down here too a little bit if you'd like to, because obviously if it's starting to come into boost and you're running 17, 16, and then back into here, that's why it's so important to make sure you know where your cylinder air mass is, because if you're running like 15 pounds boost and your cylinder air mass is screwed up and you're only running 0.72 or whatever, it's gonna be real in here. But usually you should be down into here when you're running boost at wide open throttle. Okay, again, there's a high octane table. Sorry, the same thing. Usually what you can do is you can copy this into the other one and make these the same. Or some people like to keep the low a little lower and keep the high, you can do whatever you'd like. But usually they copy and paste and you make these exactly the same when I'm building a tune. That way, you're not fighting, issues, small issues. Flex fuel, this is set to 0. Obviously, if you're going to build a flex fuel tune, you should go look at a flex fuel map on a different vehicle and see how they have that scaled out. This is your intake air temp. Now this is, you want to scale this and get rid of this timing here, because it's pulling 8 degrees. If it goes up to 130 degrees, well, you're definitely going to go up towards that area depending on what you're doing with your vehicle, but you're going to run at least 120 to 130 intake air temp. So you just want to set these to 0. Otherwise it's going to be pulling timing and you're not going to know why. And depending on how big the turbo is and how efficient it is and everything else, you might be coming into here and getting rid of these too. You might be going all the way up to 180. But just for now, we're just going to do a base, but this will pull timing. You need to know that. The engine coolant temp, this adds degrees down here when it's starting to come up warm, and then anything over 212, it's going to start pulling degrees. I usually leave this alone. And if you don't like this, you can get rid of this and put zeros down here. But a couple degrees here and there ain't gonna hurt nothing. Let's see. This is some people put these high. This is just when the vehicle's idling. You spark and drive and then park. Some people put these really high. They put them at like 30 degrees. You can put them at 20. Usually if they got a cam, you need to put a little more ignition in it to get the vehicle to be happy. But some people just put 30 degrees in it right away and just leave it alone right there where it idles. This is your overspeed and underspeed. If you want to get your cam to chop, you'd want to run these negative 20 down here. So negative 20 through here all the way across. And then you would go positive 20 all the way across till the 0. Don't put numbers in the 0 mark. And then your spark minimum, so negative 20 degrees, probably be fine on that. I don't think they have they don't have a positive, so I don't have to worry about that. This is your knock control. I would leave this alone. Leave all that stuff alone. Torque management, I usually put this right to 640 and max it out.